So, hello everyone, today I make a video how to play JP, right? Clearly the best character in the game, and also I would say the hardest character in the game. So of course I picked him up right now, but JP for me is by far the character I love to play, right? Because I love to play control characters, right? So for example in Guilty Gear, I'm playing Xenologue and Testament, right? I used to play a lot of Guile, right, etc. Right? So JP is my kind of character. And this video here, I explain to you how to play JP, right? But first and foremost, this video, I hope to explain how to play his kind of archetype, how to approach what is called strong control characters, right? And that's also why JP, I would say, is the hardest character to play, generally speaking. I'm not talking about like balance, like top tier or whatever, but from like a mental standpoint, you know, how do you play JP? Because I think JP, a lot of people will struggle how to play JP, right? And especially if you're a new player fighting games, you probably honestly shouldn't start with JP, right? Because the game tells him here is the hardest, and he is probably the hardest character in the game. And for example, I would say that Dhalsim, right, not a control character, is easy to play. So let's first talk about the difference between JP, Dhalsim, and Guile, right? Okay, so let's first talk about what is the difference, right, between different control characters. And I always say this thing, this goes down to what is called this is being proactive and reactive, right? So JP here, he's a proactive character. And that is why he's the hardest character to play in the game, more or less, right? Because the proactive character is harder to play because you have to predict what the other guy's gonna do, right? Where if you play a reactive character, you can of course react to what they're doing, right? So Guile is what's called a speed control. Guile, you can see what they're doing, and you can do a flash kick, or you can do a sonic boom, right? And you can by that sense, react to what they're doing, right? But JP is a slower character, strong control or slow control. His abilities takes longer time, it takes more setup, right? For example, this ability here is a clear setup of setting a spike at him eventually, right? That's very, very typical for a slow control character. But anyway, let's talk about the general difference then, because I think that this is what you have to understand, right? To be a good JP player in general. And I mean this if you play Guilty Gear, Blast Blue, whatever, right? Soul Calibur, basically. You have to understand the difference of what kind of character you're playing, right? So, Guile, as I mentioned, is a very iconic speed control, right? Because he's fast, he is... Sonic booms have very short recovery time, you can shoot a lot of them and so on, right? But the effect of the sonic boom then is quite low, right? Like one sonic boom doesn't do much damage. Where if you do JP's, you know, this thing, right, the grab thing, it does a very high damage, right? It's a very, very powerful range throw, or like range projectile throw, whatever you call it, right? It does very high damage. However, you can't really spam it, right? Compared to like sonic boom spamming, right? So Guile, speed control, and JP is strong control, right? Dhalsim then, it was typically called use control, or like control, and control characters, which is kind of in the middle, right? They're having a mixture of reactive and proactive abilities. They usually have more utility, and I think that's pretty good in this game. Yeah, Dhalsim can like teleport, do this thing can behind, he can do different kind of fireballs, right? So his utility is higher. He's a control character definitely, but he also doesn't do as high damage as JP does. And I'm not talking about a combo, I'm talking about, you know, one single hit, right? Again, this is probably, I think so in the game, right, the strongest projectile in the game, right? Not looking at like supers or whatever, but it's like one projectile that throws you, right? So Dhalsim is kind of in the middle, right? And the reason, like what I keep saying, right, why it's hard to play JP, and I would say again, any kind of strong control character, or generally speaking, control is hard to play in any fighting game, right? Not always. There might be some really weird speed characters, really fast, whatever, right? But generally speaking, right, control characters are harder because you have to keep zoning, you have to keep distance, and so on, right? But the reason, the reason why JP is hard to play, right? And again, I would say the hardest character to play is because the punishment is much more severe, right? So because you have to be proactive, and you have longer loading, and you throw your abilities, have longer cast time, longer recovery time, and so on, right? That means that your opponent, if you do a mistake, right, you're gonna get punished much harder, of course. Where if you do a mistake with Guile at this kind of distance, you can kind of block, right, after you do a sonic boom. Dhalsim, as I keep saying, he's in the middle, so it's easy to punish Dhalsim, but it also might easier to JP, right? So that's the biggest reason, right? If you fight a good player, they're gonna do like a full hit combo on you, right? And I say this thing as again, general here. I have played many things in my life, right? Written about them, written them and so on, right? And I used to play these characters. For example, I played Dormammu in Masquerade 3, right? I played Testament in Guilty Gear and Xenologue, which is kind of the speed of that game. Xenologue is basically Guile of Guilty Gear, right? And Testament is like JP then, right? Testament, not in the latest Guilty Gear Strife, but in early Testament games, he could place this blood net, right? And he says, well, yeah, it's a woman now, but he used to be a man, whatever. Testament, back in the days, had this blood net ability, right? It's very similar to this ability when you summon a spike in the air, right? And eventually they jump into the blood net. So it's very, very similar. Dormammu has this like flame carpet you place on the ground, right? Again, these abilities are all proactive. You think about in the future. He's probably gonna land over here, so to put it over here, right? And that's why they will get harder. And honestly, JP is probably easier to play than Testament. But Testament is like, especially the Old Testament. You have to think about, okay, I have to play my 2 blood nets, one over here and like one over here, and then I'm standing over here and I'm shooting down here. So that's way more like Venom. It's not an annoying character in Guilty Gear. He plays pool balls. You have to remember where the pool balls are and so on. So this is, you know, the mentality, right? And that's why compared to why it's harder to play than, for example, Jamie, who should go on and, you know, punch them in the face, right? And that being said, on like high pro level, right, this might not be true anymore, because then it's like, oh, but I'm facing the AP and he can do this thing. Oh, he can do this thing. He can do this thing, you know, and it's super annoying. I'm playing Sangib. Then on like a high level game, right, then it's much more like, oh, these mechanics are hard to beat. How do I approach the APU? How do I approach Dhalsim or whatever, right? Then that's much more the issue if you as a player. Or if you're like a 9 out of 10, you know, pro player or something, right? But when you're playing, generally speaking here, this video is for, you know, this video is for general, is how to play JP, right? For most people, the issue isn't gonna be like, how do I approach this thing, or how do I counter this thing? So the issue is gonna be like, how do I even survive as JP, right? Now, I have played this game for about 10 or so hours now, only as JP, and a little bit as Jamie actually. So I play like 1 hour Jamie, 9 hours of ranked with JP, right? And it's all about learning how to survive with JP, right? Much more than like, how do I specifically counter this my super kind of thing. That's like way, you know, when you play the game a lot, right? Not it's much more about learning about the zoning, this and so on. But anyway, I thought I really answered my first point here, that you have to understand how to approach this kind of character, right? So when you play AP, like I keep saying, it's all about the zoning, the distance, learning how, when can I do this thing, when is it safe, right? When can I throw this thing? This is the best ability, right? The grab thing. When can I do this thing? When can I put this thing up? And a lot about is like how to force my opponent to play like I wanted to play, right? So if my first point was, okay, JP is proactive. You have to be proactive, think about how to be proactive, right? You should try to predict how they're gonna do. My second point is kind of the Yomi of it. You have to force them to play how you want to play. So talk about that a little bit on the mentality, and then we go into actual like mechanics of JP. And so. Number 2 then, right? How do I control my opponent in a general, you know, control play sense, right? I think the best example I had yesterday was that I faced a lot of Rys, right? I played 10 games in a row. I faced this guy, right? You know, the same character, right? And I won every game. I think I had like 8 or 9-0 or something. And I started playing a rank, literally because JP is very good against countering Hadokens, right? So every time they do Hadoken, I do this thing, I do this thing, I do this thing, right? That's a very good Hadoken counter, of course, because you can punish them. They throw Hadoken at you, you punish it, and you block it after for sure. I bring it up because what I noticed with most people I played against is the first they lost a round on trying to Hadoken me, right? And now they are instead they completely stop doing Hadokens, and they just try to approach me, right, without using Hadoken anymore. Which makes sense. You probably shouldn't throw that many Hadokens against JP, right? Or similar fireballs. It's also max distance, right? But that's kind of what I want, right? Talk about controlling and being proactive, right? So by predicting that you're gonna do Hadoken, and I'm countering you with my ability, right? I'm countering you with that spike thing, right? Okay, and now I know that. And you stop throwing your fireballs. What happens then? Well, you're gonna walk more, right? You're gonna approach me more by walking. Well, then this ability, right? Then this ability gets way better, right? Because they're gonna walk more towards me. If they're trying to kind of mid-range Hadoken, right? They're gonna be somewhere around here. then okay, so I'm telling about the disability. I honestly, I mean, I have a hard time talking and doing my input apparently. Then disability is better, right? When it's trying to be more mid-range or so on. So what I'm talking about as point number 2 is how to play AP and generally control, especially a strong control character, is that I want to force you into a position, right? And not because I necessarily want to have you here or I want to have you here or whatever, but what I want to have you is that I want to know what you're probably gonna do, right? Because again, you can punish me so hard, right? And my strength is the whole proactive, right? Setting up the abilities, you know, setting up these things. My strength is to be able to punish you for doing stuff, right? And keeping you away, right? So if I manage to make the replayer stop doing Hadokens, right? Now I know it's gonna approach me by walking more, by jumping more perhaps, but if they're good players, they won't jump that much, then I walk towards me, right? And the more they walk towards you, the better this ability gets, right? So now I can change my approach, how to approach them, right? And then they're gonna start jumping more because I do things. Then I'm ready for this thing, you know what I mean? So it's a lot about to play a control character. In the same in any fighting game, I think mostly it's about like I wanna force you in the specific playstyle, and when you're in that zone or that playstyle or whatever, now this ability that I have is gonna be even better, right? Because I probably won't miss as much, right? So that's kind of where I wanna push it around, right? And if this changes a lot, if they don't do that for a long time and back and forth, then it got more of a guessing game, right? But that's kind of it. As a strong control character, as I keep saying, you're proactive. You don't want to have a guessing game, right? If you're playing Guile, as I mentioned earlier, then the whole guessing game is much better for you because you can be reactive. Right? Basically, if you guess wrong, you might still be able to beat them because you can flash kick or whatever, right? But if you're playing JP is a terrible anti-air actually. This thing, I mean, it works, but he doesn't have a special good anti-air. So for example, in JP's case, you don't want to have a guessing game, right? You want to force them in a specific position, right? So that's kind of how I think about control as well. That you wanna set the tempo of the game, right, or how the game is played. So even if they force it you, even they go in your face this right, and they're super angry at you, whatever, that's fine too. You have to block that, whatever, of course, but that's fine too because the hardest part for JP, I would argue for, is when they play kind of random, right? Or if they use all their abilities, basically, right? The more limited they are. If they play hyper aggressive, well, then you know it, right? You can use this thing, you can counter that, you know what I mean? You can use the spike that is close to you, someone, yeah. If you want to play, you want to put them in a one-dimensional playstyle, right? That's the best way to kind of counter whatever you get, but you can remove again the guessing game, right? But anyway, now let's talk about the actual mechanics of JP then. Okay, so we talked about the mentality of a strong control player. Hope you guys like that. You know, please subscribe to and so on, right? Like I said, it applies to Testament, it applies to other game cats as well, right? And generally applies to Dhalsim as well in this game a lot too. Not as much with Guile, but I would say most what I've said with JP is true with Dhalsim as well, right? They're obviously the most similar characters. But now then, let's talk about actual abilities, right? And again, this is kind of a basic guide of JP. If you want to see more, you know, please subscribe to the channel. I can make a lot more videos about JP and combos or whatever. But I will talk more about the fundamentals right now. How do you fundamentally play JP? What's a good ability? What's a bad ability? How do I approach my enemies, right? What do I do, and so on. And so far, I haven't like super high rank yet, right? Because the game just launched yesterday. But I've won most because I played. I had like 10, 11 wins in a row yesterday immediately, right? And I crappy last, lost one round, another 10 rounds. So I'm kicking most people's ass when I play JP. And I lost more games from the crash, talked about my video yesterday, the PC crash issue, more than actual losing the game. In the actual losing the game. I said to be the best. No, but seriously, I mean, I think what I'm coming from, right, as I mentioned in point 1 and point 2, is that because I know how to play a control character like AP, right, I can just kind of manage to play him without knowing the combos, right? Now I have learned some of the combos, right, of course, after playing him for one day. But even before I knew the best combos, I could still beat most people because I know how to play the character. You know what I mean? I understand mentality, how to play the character. So now here, again, I talk more here about the mechanics, right? How to play the character more so than, oh, this is the best combo. I thought this is the ability when you use it, you know what I mean? So let's talk about abilities. So first of all, JP doesn't have a good anti-air, okay? This, I mean, it's a pretty good anti-air itself. This is hard crunching, right? This is your anti-air, right? You can't really use the JP, his special abilities doesn't really counter anti-air. So you don't really have, the spike team can kinda do it. When they're starting to jump, if you spike them on their way up, you can kinda do it. What I do sometimes is that I do the his specials, right? The number 1, number 3. They can kind of land into your special, which is kind of classic Street Fighter. So if you jump from me in this kind of way, right, you can throw your level 3 special at them, and you kind of grab them on the way down. This is true for many characters in the game, but it's a kind of classic anti-air. You can special into that thing. That kind of works. His special 1 is also like a beam attack, right? So also kind of counters anti-air. But again, if they jump straight up or if they jump close to you, you're gonna miss them. So your actual anti-air is actually the hard thing, right? And this comes back to what I mentioned earlier, that JP is a proactive character, right? You don't really have a good anti-air at all either, right? So if they jump at you, you're kind of screwed, you know. In mass situation, if you stand like this range or so, and you're trying to hit them with this thing and they jump, you basically can't punish that. You can't rescue that. But if you play Guile, you might be able to do a light flash kick, right? Because the Guile's reactive, right? So you have to think about that. That being said, though, this ability is pretty good if you actually just are patient and you kind of, you know, slowly attack them, and then you kind of jump sometimes, yeah. But you have to kind of, again, you know, be a lot about where you stand, right? So if you're standing over here and they jump straight up, sure, okay, then it works. But if you jump slightly over you, right, this will miss. So you don't really have a good anti-air if they do what's called a wall swap or a block swap, right? When they jump over you like this, close to you. You can't really counter that with anything JP has, really. You can like parry it, I guess, but you know what I mean? You don't really have any like actual JP ability. So that's probably one of his biggest weaknesses. You don't have a good anti-air. Even though, again, this ability is really good for certain angles, but you can't really use it over. If you swap over, you can't use it. And you can't really use his other abilities. Not really. The kick is, this kick is okay. This kick here is okay, right? The hard, unique kick, if they come in kind of an angle. Some characters, this kick will work as well, right? They're kind of jumping at you, flying down at you. Because Yomi's kind of down kick, you can do this thing sometimes, depending on the angle, right? So that's the biggest thing to think about usually. Jumping is hard to counter, and you can punch that. Of course, you can also punch it with the classic, you know, whatever. But from a category, so that's number 1, okay? You anti-air with this thing, and you can have to time that, right? Number 2 then, when you jump over people, you have to use light kick, okay? This is a very famous thing, yeah, light kick. Yeah, I hate this, that every character is different, but yeah, you use your light kick to kind of jump over them, and overhead, of course, is medium kick forward with most characters, so it's kind of basic, right? Also have your psychic forward, so this ability, also overhead. And actually, this is one of my favorite with JP, actually. So, if I flip you down, right, now you can approach, of course, with overhead. This is a classic snippet, right? I flip you, overhead, you know, very classic, right? So what you usually do is that, you know, you flip them over, this thing, that thing, you know, up and down. Classic, basic Street Fighter. What you can do is flip them over, and now, when you're getting up, right, you can then do your medium overhead. So that's a very good ability. Actually, one of the best abilities for JP is this ability, yeah. This one here is like in the middle, right? And the hard one is in the bottom. So the medium one is very good. And I also like how it's the same button, right? So, as I said, his overhead is medium forward, right? And the ghost thingy that hits overhead is also medium kick, right? So it's the same button, right? So both are medium, same kick button. So that's also great from a general mental standpoint. Okay, it's the same button. The overhead is very... I mean, I like it. It would be worse if it was like light or whatever, right? So that's nice that the game is the same button. But seriously, this ability is very, very good. Very often when I flip someone over, right, and I'm standing kind of here or maybe slightly backward, rough here, right, but also even close to them, especially around this range, kind of half screen range, then doing these things is very good because a lot of people block down in guard, right, and you can reach them with these things well, but you basically flip them over, right, you go back a bit and you do this thing, you can slightly go back. It's very, very good, I think, because if you do this thing immediately, right, this classic, but with this ability, you can go slightly back and delay it, right? So they might block a bit, and they might go up a bit, or they might block longer. So it's very, very powerful, honestly. I feel it's a bit one of the best abilities. Yeah, overhead ghost slide, so the medium one. It's probably its best kind of like, what do we call it? Mind games or whatever, up, down, low kind of thing, right? Because it's really hard for them to block it on this kind of range, yeah. Roughly that range, right? Very, very good. Usually after you maybe throw them or something, you know, throw them down, right? You go back a bit, you do this thing. Yeah, it's very, very good against that. Maybe you throw them back, you know, then immediately you do this thing when they go up and you hit them. So usually the ability I use the most, I would say, this ability, yeah, when I throw them or whatever, or of course then the throw, right? But the medium overhead, very good. These ones aren't that useful. I mean, use it sometimes. The hard one is low, right? So you can trick them, and you can use EX, of course, the 2 attacks. The EX one is good sometimes if you want to pressure them, right? So you can do the EX, and if you block that, you can run after them because the 2 attacks, right? But anyway, so that's one. Medium one, very powerful, very good for your mind game, for shipping down stuff. Not so much otherwise. Now, the best ability is, of course, this ability, right, which I keep doing. This is a basic ability I win, I feel, almost every game, right? So, essentially, it's just like a range throw, right? And it reminds me of Xenologue, my favorite character in Guilty Gear, right? Xenologue can also do this range throw thing, which is very powerful. So, of course, it's powerful because it throws them, right? It grabs them. It does really high damage, so I think from a general JP standpoint, most of my EX meter, right? You know, you do a double attack, so you're spending energy, right? Some of this thing sometimes, but usually I spend my meter for yeah, like an EX throw thing, because the damage is very high and it hits really quick, right? I think it's probably the best EX meter for general. For example, you can throw them down, right, and then immediately when they get up again, you EX that one. That hits a lot of people because they might get up to Hadouken you, to get you, right. So that's where it's usually the best, when you can just throw them down, push down, whatever, right. It's very good in that sense. The light one is very good if you're dashing forward against you, right. If you do this thing and they spam dash, no GP is slow, but you know, the faster character, they kind of comes out quicker. It does cause less damage, but it's very good against the kind of they tend to get at you quick, right. And the hard one is just kind of good when you're trying to, you know, we have the long range fight, right? I rarely use the medium one, I feel. Yeah, the light one is the one to kind of counter them when they're approaching you, right? The hard one is to do the damage. And EX one, of course, for like fireball fights and so on. And then when they stand up. The medium one I probably use very little. Kind of opposite of this ability, but I use the medium one the most by far. Yeah, I use the medium one. I wouldn't say not, but a lot. Definitely more than the other ones. Now let's talk about these spikes, right? The spikes are very strong controller, right? When you summon these things, and then they will hit eventually, right? So you have, first of all, the spikes are different range, right? In most fighting games, right? The light one is close to you, medium in the middle, hardest, you know, over there, right? I always say this thing, the hard one is generally not good to use, okay? If you have maximum pressure on them and they have low health, okay, then it's fine usually, but the medium one tends to be the best one to use, right? You can put it in the middle between you and the enemy. So now if the guy approaches you, right, it's gonna follow him, right? So if he comes to you, this will protect you, right? So you can block and so on. But it also hits them, right, if they stand still. So if you approach them a little bit, and then you can go back, it might hit them, right? So yeah, the medium one is the best by far. So you can get here, you can maybe get this thing right, you know, you can, see what I mean? With the light one, protects you the most, but you know, they might not approach it, right? And the hard one, I feel most players just kind of run away from it, right? You know what I mean? It's kind of like weird, right? The hard one, you follow it up with something like this, maybe. You kind of get a combo going, but I don't know. I think the hard one is better for combos, but nah, medium one is usually what you want to use. Okay, let's talk about the EX then. So EX, with the spike thing, you summon 2 of them. This one is very good to defend yourself, extremely good. If you do this thing and you just block, right, it's very hard to approach you now. So if they're like 1 health, you want to time them out. It's very good. Of course, it's very good to attack them during it, right? You can jump over them, you can trick them. You know, it's very good. So the EX one is one of his best moves. It's probably the second best thing to spend meter on after I think the grab is so powerful, right? Because it really is good to approach enemy. You can do overhead, do down, you know. You can like set it up by doing this thing, trip them over. Bad time it wrong, but yeah, that's bad timing. Bring it a point. You have to time it though, but. Yeah, the burn, you come, so on. So you have a lot of different stuff, hard to block it, right? And then of course you can teleport to it. So teleportation though, that's kind of tricky though, okay? I said the medium one is the best one, I think the medium one is the best one. But when I want to teleport though, I will say the hard one is usually better, right? Because you usually want to teleport with the hard, because if they go at you, if they go close to you, you can then teleport behind them, right? And if they're standing there over there, being kind of afraid of you, right? You can pressure them with that one, right? So different angles as in most fighting games. And if you do the light teleport, you set it back, medium teleport, you get forward, and the hard button actually shoots immediately. So if you hit hard button, you will spike immediately. So that also can be used for. I don't tend to use the hard spike that much, but basically, like I said, right, if you do hard now, you will spike immediately. So that can be good to have, mostly for this ability. I think when you do 2 of them, then you immediately spiking them can be kind of tricky for the opponent, right? And you can of course launch it further away from you. So to launch it further away, right? Instead of EXing with light medium, if you EX with medium hard, right? Now it gets over there instead, right? And if you EX with light hard, then it gets like that, right? Yeah. So you can also kind of control how the where they spawn, right? But this is something that is hard, that a stick, I would say, or a hitbox, right? Because if you have a normal controller, it's hard because you have to use your finger, right? You have to kind of hit the button like this or that, right? Depending on you with your hand. So for me, having a stick is easy to do, right? I think it's probably very hard to do with a normal gamepad controller. Probably wrong, but I think it's easier to. This is a typical ability where having a stick makes it easier, right? Because you have the button or a hitbox then, because you want to have the hands moving like this, right? But anyways, you can control it as well, right? And you can also still, of course, teleport afterwards. And that can make it tricky for them though, because they don't know where you will teleport, right? So that is tricky for them, of course. So depending on use light or medium, you can then control where you teleport, right? So I teleport here, but if I do this thing, I teleport there, right? So you can definitely trick them again. But all this being said though, you have this teleport stuff in JP. I don't find it useful, okay? Honestly, I don't find it useful. I very rarely do it. I mean, I can obviously do it, so that hard input-wise, but he doesn't have very good combos, right? As I keep saying in the beginning of the video, he is a control character, he's a strong control character. JP doesn't have very good combos in close combat, right? He can't really dish out. Okay, no, I did super here, you know. No, I did this one, sorry, I did this one. You know, you can do some combos, right? But again, my point, you can't really dish out like maximum damage or whatever JP. So I don't really feel, honestly, this whole like shenanigans of like, oh, I can teleport here, I can do where I tricked you with a spike, and now I teleport here, and now I teleport over here instead, you know, or no, I spiked you, or no, I do this thing and I teleport there, or I teleport there. Like, I honestly think this is very useful. I do it very rarely in game. Maybe I suck at AP. I feel it has its uses, but I honestly mostly feel it useful against other, you know, practical guys like Dhalsim and so on, right? Teleport to him instead. And sometimes when they play like Guile or Ryu or Ken or whatever, and they just really spam fireballs, and even if you can spike that, you're kind of like, this I will teleport in current situation. But otherwise, what I usually use teleport for, right, with me, is when the guy approaches me, right? No, then I teleport. No, it was too late. Then I teleport by doing this thing, right? When they approach me, so I get behind them, right? If I face like a Yomi or a Yuri or a Kane, whatever, right? And they're running towards me, right? I can teleport to get out of the corner or teleport to get behind them. But usually it's to get out of the corner, right? So if I'm in the corner, they're coming at me, I can teleport, they get in the corner, right? So it's a good way to leave the corner. Kind of typical, you know, control character like Akuma, to get out of the corner, right? With teleport, so kind of classic. That's mostly what I use it for, right? So it's a little bit this whole like shenanigan of like, oh, what will I do now? It has uses, but it doesn't feel very useful because the issue, right, is that when you land with them, you can't really do much damage anyway, right? And you also get close to them. So I think for most players, don't focus on doing this like, you know, what's called this switcheroo double teleport combo. It's like whatever. It's like it is very rarely will it be useful for you anyway, and very rarely will you do more damage doing that than just keeping them at distance, right? And so on. But anyway, let's go on then. So we haven't talked about the last ability, with the punch. Talk about this kicks, right? These are his kicks. These are, yeah, JP kicks there. But yeah, let's talk about JP's punches now then, right? So this ability, the kind of the swipe thing, this is basically your combo with JP, I would say. As I said, when you play JP, right? I keep saying in this video, but it's all about the mentality of how do I control the face. It's all about how do I control the ball. It's not so important to do the combos with JP, right? I don't think I'm lazy to do a combo video, but I don't think it's that important, okay? This thing, you know, you do this thing or whatever. This is kind of like the combo, you know. I don't know what I'm trying to do here, but it's basically that thing, and you can shoot this thing and so on, you know. But that's kind of the combo, right? Yeah. Very often when they put me in the corner, I can't do this thing, right? So I get them out the corner. Yeah. So most of these combos are basically around this thing, right? You can of course follow it up. So after they land, you can do one of these things, depending on if you use EX or not, and so on, right? If you EX, it's easier for EX, right? Because it gets more landing space. that, right? Yeah, so you can spike them and so on. That's kind of the basic combo. Reminds me of like Dormammu in Mortal Kombat 3. You push him away with his like black shot thing, and then you summon a gravity hold at them, right? So it's kind of the same thing, right? But anyway, I haven't mentioned the spikes so much. But honestly, I don't know. I think the spikes are self-explanatory, right? They're talking about the spikes. I mean, obviously you have the spike thing. You do two down this thing, right? And you summon the spike thing. This is like his best ability in a way. I think the grabs better, but yeah, I mean, obviously the spikes. What can I say, right? If you set a max distance, you know, you just do this thing, you spike them, you know, you spike them. I guess Hadouken's right. That's kind of what you do mostly. The light one, I think isn't that useful. This one, honestly, it's kind of like when they are that close to you, they usually will jump over it or they will dash through it or whatever. So it's that's good actually. The medium one is very powerful. The medium one is usually what we use, right? So the medium one, you can have this here, and they're approaching you, right? So the medium one, roughly there, that's gonna be what they run into, right? So the medium one is usually the one that you will punish them for like dashing towards you or doing something like some kind of weird ability they have, right? Go toward at you, like maybe like a Blanca ball or whatever. They can hit that thing, right? The light one usually is too slow or hard to time. So yeah, very rarely there's a light one. The medium one usually is the one I use when they approach me, right? And then the hard one, of course, is the kind of anti-fireball, where they throw at you. Maybe they play like Yomi, so they're drinking alcohol, or they do something on the distance. Then you do this thing, right? So he's very good at punishing opposite Hadoukens or fireballs, and also that I mentioned punishing people that are trying to gain a resource, right? Like a Yomi, try to gain a plus in something, right? Same thing with Yuri, trying to gain her like power up. You can also punish them by doing it a few times, right? So that's very useful for that. But I think the spikes are pretty you know, that's the basic ability. You spike them depending on where they stand, right? Usually if they run into you. If they're standing on a distance from me and they're very defensive, that's just blocking, right? I don't spike, I do this thing instead, right? I don't spike it often if they're standing on max distance. I only spike against mostly fireball throwers, right? Yeah. If I face like a Zangief or Marisa or whatever, right, on this distance, very likely will I do this hard spike. Very unlikely. Very unlikely will I do that because they're not gonna throw a fireball anyway, right? So if I face like a Marisa on max distance, I'm gonna do the medium spike, right, so they can run into it, or I'm gonna throw the hard grab, right, to get them. That's what I'm gonna do probably. If they're playing very defensively, they're probably gonna jump over it, right? And we have this kind of fight, right? I'm not gonna spike so much against like Zangief on max distance, right? It doesn't do much, right? And then of course you have this spike, which is pretty good. This one is pretty good actually. At the air sometimes, depending on distance, but usually it kind of covers the ground, right? You can spike differently with different EX buttons, just like the other ability. Right? You can spike at different ranges, you know, depending on what buttons you pick, right? So this is pretty good, like finish off a review. Yeah, many times. I don't know why. Even when I'm not doing it, they keep throwing Hadoukens at you, right? So this one can be really good to use punish like a guy standing over there. You do high damage to him, you know. This won't work. This won't work, but we set up the next combo. So, talk about that ability now. So this ability is level 2, right? The level 2 summons several of these things, right? Summons several spike things. Usually, you don't combo with them. It's kind of like I did there. It won't work in the sense that, oh, I'm throwing this, you know, fireball combo, whatever. That's not what you do it for. You do it like I did there. You hit someone with, you know, something like a spike, right? And then you set it up afterwards. Then you summon these things around them, so you can approach them now, right? You can run over to them, and you can jump, or you can go in, or you can do like a sweep or something like that. And then the spikes will attack them, right? It's very similar to Menat. This probably thing about it, SF5. Yeah, Menat is a girl with a ball. It's a 5, and she can summon these like 6 balls, right? And then she punches you, kicks you, the balls will randomly fly, or they will fly once every second. There's some rules for that, I don't remember now, but it's like, she summons 6 balls, and when she attacks you, 1 ball will fly at you, and if you just like a combo, it's like 3 balls will fly, and it's a kind of cooldown thing, but whatever. If it's similar to that, right, basically you summon the spikes, similar to this thing, right, but you summon more of them, and then you can jump around, you kick, punch, or whatever, and then eventually they will all spike at them, right. So usually what you do, it's kind of what I did there, right? You flip them over, and then you summon all the spikes when they're lying down, so they can stand up, right? And be surrounded by the spikes, and then you can kind of do your combo and at least pressure them into probably not blocking it. So that's kind of what you do that for. The level 1 special is pretty straightforward. I just, you finish with it. Yeah, I do that one, and if I hit that one, then I usually do my level 1 to push them away, right? That's kind of what I usually, if Sandy, if it's on me, or Marissa or whatever, then I will push them out, right? So they fly to the other side of the field again, and now I got maximum space again, because I want to be close to Sandy, right? That's usually what I do it for. The level 3, I mean, is the classic finisher, right? Yeah, kicks right there. I do it pretty frequently, but I think it's the same thing as talked about. I do it mostly after one of these drive parry things, whatever it's called. Yeah, I don't remember the name, but yeah, you do this thing, and then they hit it with that, and then you feed. That's kind of usually how I do. I feel this kind of thing. You hit them with that, and you sit there and do that thing. Yeah, I feel it's kind of how usually goes up. I don't throw. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I sometimes throw it when they jump at me, because you do teleport with him. It kind of flows half the screen, like here, roughly speaking. So if they're jumping at you from kind of like maybe this distance, and he's jumping kind of halfway, like he's jumping like that, right? Yeah, roughly this distance between you and Jamie. If he jumps to me now, you can now do the super level 3 here, and he will land on it, and you will super him, right? So that's kind of where I do it too, kind of like classic anti-air. But it doesn't work if he's like this close, so then you're gonna miss him. If he jumps there, you're gonna miss him, right? If he jumps near troll, you're gonna miss him. I think you might hit him if he jumps near troll, if you hit it when they're almost on the ground, right? Or when they kind of come down, maybe. If you jump on max distance, you can't do it, because it reaches roughly half the screen. So you need to be roughly here or so to punish jump with your level 3, roughly speaking. It's a little hard to tell exactly, and obviously it depends on what the cat does to us. Some kicks they do whatever, we get a different hurt box, so it depends on what they also do in the mid-air. But it can be useful if they kind of jump like here and they jump at you. Okay, so lastly then, talking about this ability. I don't find it useful, honestly. So this is a counter. So obviously I'm tired to put it in, but you can do it easily. So what this thing does, let me throw this. Screw this thing, okay. No, but this ability, honestly, I find it pretty shit, honestly. I think this is probably the worst ability. Okay, let me say it here, right? I hate this ability. It's not very good. What it basically does, right, is that it counters for you. And usually I like character with counters. It also is very common for a control character to have a counter, right? Because you can then counter them when they come at you, and you can push them out or whatever. Extra low as a counter in Manning, you have to throw his mantle over them and you can't see and so on, right? But this ability is kind of weird because it doesn't immediately hurt them. It kind of blocks their attack, and then instead JP summons this like crystal ball thing. I guess it reminds me of Ed, I suppose, the most, right? From SF5. Ed can summon this giant psycho ball, right? This purple ball that flies at them. Which is a pretty good ability, actually. It's a pretty good ability with Ed. Yeah, you can combo it, you can land on it, you can like pull them into it, so on. But that's Ed's V trigger, right? Yeah, the ball is V trigger 1, right? And the other one is the boxing thing. Yeah, whatever. It's similar to Ed's. Probably the most. It follows them. But the thing is that this counter thing, it doesn't happen immediately. So you kind of counter, it's like a parry more, and then you summon the ball thing, and then the ball thing flies after them. But usually what happens is that if you counter them with that, what I rather want to see, right, is that a counter will make me damage you and push you away from me, so now I can do whatever I want as a control character. But instead, it's kind of like a parry issue with this counter. It doesn't hurt you actually immediately, and then you can still punish me. So so most players, they just keep punching at you anyway, right? Which means you just block it, and then they bother hit them maybe. But honestly, I feel it's kind of weird because maybe I'm just bad at this ball thing. But in my opinion, the ball thing is terrible because usually you will parry them with it. They will keep attacking you anyway, right? And then when the ball starts to be triggered after them, they will just block it, right? And you still don't have time to punish them usually. So it's kind of weird. And sometimes if you EX it depends what they do, but it's weird. What you can do though is you can kind of do it against fireballs, I guess. So you can kind of summon your ball thing as a Hadouken or something. But then you can do the spike anyway. I don't know. I usually feel that this counter thing doesn't really have any purpose for JP. Because if they're after you, like a Yomi is standing in your face, right? And instead of doing a proper counter where you like pass them away or whatever, right? Like in most fighting games, instead of summons a ball, it takes you a while to do something. It doesn't really feel like you can actually gain from that, and many people just ignores it basically and keeps attacking you. I don't know. I was listening. Obviously, I want to play GP for like 10 hours now, whatever, right? This is the second day here. It's a little bit of my first. It's a little bit of a review, I suppose, of GP as well, right? And I haven't really felt that the ball counter thing is useful in most situations. It's just too slow, and the damage is negligible, and it's also. I think is that I hate it honestly because you have to also counter it properly. You know what I mean? Usually counters those high damage in fighting games, right? Because it's hard to do a counter. Because you have to time your opponent correctly, and you have to punish them in the correct situation with your counter. Depending on some games, the counters has like enormously high, frame or time data. So you can do anyway. But in most games, it's harder to counter someone, right? Than to just punch them in the face, right? It's harder to counter than to just throw them or whatever, right? So it is weird, and I don't feel that. Basically, the hit chance of your counter is so low compared to the damage it does or whatever, right? Ignoring fireballs and so on, yeah, it doesn't feel worth it. So honestly, I would say, yeah, I extremely rarely do I use the counter. But that might be because I'm bad then, right? Maybe I haven't figured it out, but honestly, I haven't seen anyone really use the counter as much with JP. And that does suck a bit because, yeah, I like having counters on my character, especially if I'm a control character, right? But if the counter was more useful, like, oh, I just push you away and you take the damage, but I get this again, or I do this thing, I teleport away or something, then I probably use it more. So, for example, look at the last thief of the game, Fang's parry, where he kind of like do this thing, right? That would feel much better, right? It's kind of like a teleport. It's like whoop, he flies away from you, right? That I would prefer to have in JP. He's gonna evade you. Ed has the one, talking about Ed earlier, Ed is the one who steps through them, yeah. I would prefer something like that, where you can like step away from the opponent, or do some damage. But honestly, I mean, because I'm playing control character, I would prefer some kind of like, oh, it's a counter, but I just evade you, I go away from you, right? That would be the best probably. You could always if it teleported me to the other screen immediately, right? Yeah, that would be the best. But that being said, of course, I do agree that it'd probably be imbalanced, right? If the counter just teleported me to the other side of the screen or something, it would probably be too powerful. But anyway, that's kind of my thought about JP. I haven't maybe covered the very basic normals. I think about them, but I mean, it's kind of like I mentioned. This is an important thing, right? Usually you land after this thing and do like a little bit of hitting, right? Range thing. Kicks are fine. You have the slide thing. It's not a very good slide, honestly. No. This slide is, I mean, it's okay, but it's not the level of, like a Vega slide or something, or a Bison slide. And I don't do that often. I don't know. Please give a combo look at what do you more wonder? It's kind of basic. Like I said, I don't want to talk much about combos. That to me is so interesting, especially with JP, right? The combos aren't very interesting. I don't really care too much about, oh, what's the best combo, what's this thing or whatever. I mean, with a character like JP, you don't have any combos anyway. You have like 3-4 hit combos. They're very short, they're very simple. The hard thing with JP, like I said at the beginning of the video, isn't to learn, oh, how do I do this like 20 hit combo, right? The issue with JP isn't like, how do I do a combo? The issue is like, how do I survive, or what ability should I use in max distance? Oh, hard spike, hard throw, maybe the guy say medium, the down medium. This what's called like the heaven spike. I don't know the names. Okay, I'm probably saying that. I mean, what is it called? Departure. See, I admit it. I don't know the names. So for example, departure medium, right? That's kind of talking about. Yeah, departure medium. For example, usually the best one, right? That's kind of what makes you survive. Yeah, Amicia, not very useful. That's probably the least usability, I would say. You can see it here, right? Someone says bomb. Yeah, the bomb isn't very useful. It's just hard to get power from it. EX1 comes to them, but it's just hard to, because they will ignore it anyway most of the time, right? But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe, like button, right? Hope you guys taught some basics of JP, and I hope my approach is more interesting than me talking about, oh, this is the frame data, right? But I think what I said, for example, that departure, then the name, yeah, departure medium is the one that's most useful, right? What's it called? Turbalon? Whatever this is called. Embrace? What's it called when you fly forward? or like yeah, Turbalon, yeah, Turbalon medium, right? Very useful. Turbalon medium, yeah. But again, Turbalon medium, that's overhead, right? Very, very, very useful. Jesus Christ, like I said, this ability is probably one of the biggest mind games for him. That you can stand in mid range and do like an overhead for mid range. It's really powerful, honestly, right? Because most characters doesn't have an overhead from mid range. It's straight up, right? Like most characters will have an overhead. Usually, it's pretty close combat, and most fireballs are always blockable low or standing, right? Very rarely is a fireball either low or medium. So the JP has this turbulent ability that can be like overhead and so on. That is really powerful. I mean, it's like a very specific fireball, of course, that kind of flies at them like a monster coming at them. So it's not like a normal fireball, but yeah, this move Turbalon that it has like a medium, basically a medium Hadouken, right? It's or overhead Hadouken. I mean, overhead medium Hadouken. Yeah, it's very special and probably one of his best toolkits, right? So hope you guys like that. That's what I'm thinking about more JP. Right? How can I punish them? How can I like control them? How can I like do this like ship damage at them? How can I throw this at them and force them to take some damage or push them in the corner and keep them there? How do I punish them when they try to do X or Y or Z, right? More so than like, oh, how do I do a combo with JP? It really matters much. It's more about when should I do what, like when should I summon what specific fireball. That's more how you win with JP, right? Bye, guys, subscribe and so on, and have a great day.